For joining me today. I am going to be talking about how to import really complex MIDI tracks or MIDI compositions, multiple sort of track arrangements. And some of the things that I've learned, some of this has stemmed from using the score editor, trying to integrate my workflow more between the score editor and Dorico, which I use a lot. And I've learned some useful things which have actually led me to a different workflow than the one that I had previously. I'll give you a little background on a few of the reasons why I think these four things over here are so important. First of all, when you import a large MIDI project that say has 10 to 30 orchestral tracks, you got your full winds, brass, percussion, strings, things like that, and you import them into an existing Cubase project, there's a certain sort of lump in my throat I get because it's a big commitment to import all this stuff, not really having 100% confidence how it's going to turn out, if it's all going to be useful, is it all needed? And it adds a lot of tracks, it adds a lot of stuff I have to navigate. So the first thing here is staging. Being able to break this into a multi-stage process is something that I've come to as part of my preferred workflow. So essentially, what we're going to be doing is importing this project, but into its own, or importing the MIDI rather, but into its own project. So the idea is you actually have a project that just contains all of that Dorico MIDI. And you don't play it back in there, you don't set up routing in there, you don't do anything in there. It's just a container, but it's a nice staged middle ground between Dorico and Cubase. And for folks that maybe are only importing one or two MIDI tracks, then this is total overkill. But for me, I'm typically bringing in a dozen or more orchestral tracks that I'm integrating thoughtfully in a much larger, maybe hybrid arrangement with synthesizers, drum machines, and all sorts of other stuff. And when I import 20 or 30 orchestral tracks, it kind of blows out my template, makes it feel a bit unwieldy, and it reduces the sense that I have that I'm in control of the creative process, layering things exactly where I need to. I find the staging aspect of this approach very effective. Now, the other thing is, next thing is, it's non-destructive by virtue of being staged. So when I import that MIDI, I don't have to have any concerns about damaging it, messing it up, because I've always got the original there. And yes, I always have it in Dorico, but I don't want in the back of my mind to have the stress of knowing I have to go to Dorico and export it again. It's so much easier to do in Cubase using this import tracks from project feature. The third thing over here is it's collaborative. So if you're working with other people, it can really, really facilitate things a lot. If there's one staged collection container of all that MIDI that everybody can pull from, you can even have somebody's whose maybe role it is to go in and color the tracks or clean up the MIDI for you or route it, to different routings. And then when you import it, it saves all that time, right? So it's a collaborative process that you can actually delegate sort of different roles to different people. And even if, like me, you're often doing all that work yourself, for complex projects, it can really be a big relief to work in sort of a methodology. So it's nice for me to go in and do color coding or cleaning up the MIDI, getting rid of like weird CCs that might come from somebody else's library or something, clean it all up, get rid of key switches, things like that, in a secured sort of DMZ, right? So, hey there, Ed. Thanks for joining me today. Yeah, I imagine it is. Got a lot of family in the UK. It's been rainy and windswept most of the time I've been there. So the final thing I'm going to talk about here is track presets, and that is a tool that can make things a little quicker for you if you are having to go in and click your routing to go to your rack instrument. So I'm going to walk you through all that. So that is an introduction of where we're going, and I'm going to break it now into this project and show you what I'm up to. So here, this is my standard template that I load up, and it looks like I'm in a different display, so just bear with me. So what I would do typically is I would go up to my file menu. Okay, I would go import and I'd go import MIDI file. Now I've exported a MIDI file. I'm not importing from a Dorico project. You'll notice I'm not using that command. The challenge with importing from a Dorico project is that there's a significant amount of information actually that doesn't carry over from a Dorico project. Sometimes you need to. There are certainly, as recent lessons I've done have discussed, there are advantages to both ways. But in this scenario, I'm exporting a MIDI file from Dorico. That's going to create one MIDI file, and inside that file is all of my tracks. So it's all delineated inside one file. I don't have, like, if I have 30 orchestral staves in my Dorico project, I don't have 30 MIDI tracks. I have one MIDI file, but it contains 30 tracks. So when you import the MIDI file, you get this alert. Do you want to create a project? I said yes, create. And then I go to my project folder, my Cubase folder, and I'll typically create a project like this, full score MIDI import, right? And I guess I have to, this is actually telling me where I want to import it from. So this is the MIDI file that I exported from Dorico. It's a full orchestral arrangement. So I'll go ahead and select that, open it up, and now it's going to ask me where do I want to save it. I'm going to save it in here. And it's going to create a new project that's just got all of this kind of dead, lifeless MIDI in it. But you can see it's a complicated arrangement. I've got full string sections, percussion, brass, and winds in this piece, okay? So this is not what I want to have generally imported into my precious main master project, because it means now that I have to do a lot of work to get it all sorted, and that kind of stresses me out. I prefer to have it in this sort of stage level. So now I will save this project. So I'll go save as, and I would probably go and choose a file name like this, full score MIDI import, and that's all it is. I'm done. I'll hit replace. I had created that before when I was just testing this idea out. That's it. That's how I import it, okay? Now, how do I get it into my main master project? I'm going to show you how I do that once this loads up. So right now, this would be connecting to all of my VE Pro instances. It's setting up all the routing. My template has rather complicated stem and deliverable and mixing and revision routing that, again, saves me a lot of time, but it does take a little while for it to load up. So now I would say, okay, you know what? I'm ready to work on my winds. So I go ahead and grab my winds folder. And this, I believe, is a Cubase Pro feature, tracks from project. So now I'm going to select my project that was just basically that dumb import. And I can select now any of the tracks that are in that project. And this makes it really nice. So I'm doing my winds, right? So I'm going to include my winds, and I'm going to just load up a violin because I have an example that I want to talk about later. So I just check off the instruments that I want to import. This is great, again, because it's staged. I have this container holding all of my MIDI. It's already loaded into Cubase. Maybe I've gone in and cleaned it. Maybe I've gone in and done color coding on the tracks. Maybe I've even set up routing. Maybe I've even set up like MIDI inserts or effects. You can do all that stuff. And when you import these tracks, if you check off channel and inspector settings, you're going to get all that stuff, right? So you can really compartmentalize tightening up your MIDI in one place, separate from your master project. Also, just because it comes to the top of my head, you may be working on multiple versions of this, right? And you may not just have one master project. You may have multiple projects which are actually leveraging the same MIDI content, in which case it's even nicer and more valuable to have that in another location that's just a repository, right, for it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and select replace all events and parts. I mean, I'm not replacing anything, but I want those. Absolute position just means bring it in as it is in the other project. Not relative to my cursor or anything. I don't usually save automation because the MIDI CC would already be in there. I like to choose below selected track because I selected my winds over here. It's going to bring them in there. And then I just hit OK. And then I get this. And then I'll typically grab these, drop them in my winds folder, select them all, and I have some colors set up for my Stream Deck here, which makes coloring those very easy. And now I've got them imported, and I know that they're all right there, right? So there's all my MIDI for those tracks. Now, the next big challenge, of course, is routing. And this is where the violin idea or the violin example comes in handy. So I'm going to grab my one violin track that I imported here. I'm going to bring it in to strings. And because I am a stickler for details, I'm going to go make sure that's colored correctly. So normally, if you want to route this, then you have to go, okay, here's my violin track, go up to routing here. I would have to choose, strings, find my VE Pro strings instance. I know violin's on channel 1. I want it to route out to the violin 1 return, which will be the fader channel. And I'm going to leave it like that. And that would be the process. And now this would play back on my violin instrument. But there's a slightly faster way that you can do this, which is once you have your MIDI file or your MIDI track rather actually configured just the way you want it, colored, all the rest, you can actually right click and save this as a track preset. So you can come down here, say save track preset, and you'll see that I've saved one called violin. I'd go ahead and hit violin over there, and now in the media bay on the left or on the right hand panel, you can always just go to presets. You could go to track presets, MIDI, and I would see my MIDI track presets there. And I could just drag this in like so. And then I obviously, when I saved this track preset, it had not been colored, but you'll see that it is routed, right? So now I could just do something like this. Right click on the one that I've imported, select all events, and just drag those up there. And now I'm done. So that is one extra step you can take if you are like me, doing an awful lot of this kind of stuff. I'm doing this stuff kind of all day long sometimes. And the way that I used to work, which I've made videos about and is still useful to me in some situations, was that I actually set up a whole litany of macros that would actually go and look at the track name, like violin 1, violin 2, horn 1, horn 2, and it would know which rack to connect it up to based on the fact that all of my rack instruments are loaded up in my default template, so they're always there. And then I built one macro that called all the macros for like every instrument. Now here's the challenge, which is unfortunately completely beyond our control, that makes that an outmoded way of doing things. Cubase, when it loads up rack instruments, I've learned, and it starts to distribute ports. So let's say it loads up a VE Pro instance and you got 12 ports on there, and it's addressing those ports internally. So like Cubase has its own sort of software level addressing of this information. Even though it'll always show up in our menus and drop downs in a consistent way, it is not actually addressed within the software reliably in a consistent way. And that means that the macros I set up would work a lot of the time, but they wouldn't work all the time. And there's absolutely nothing that I can do that can be done to make them work all the time. And that's what I really need. This works all the time, has the advantage of staging the process, allowing me to make progress in increments, which is also often something I need to do. I need to maybe do a bunch of cleaning. Like this would be a great example where I've got 5 or 6 cues worth of MIDI. And instead of doing the import, doing the cleanup, doing the production, I do all the imports in the morning, come back in the afternoon, I do all the cleaning, and the next day I import all the tracks into my master projects, and in the afternoon I start doing the mixing. It's, in other words, by batch processing the phases of my workflow of the production process, I actually get more efficient. So by making this important step its own stage, it facilitates that sort of workflow where it's a lot more reliable, a lot more flexible, makes it easy for me to collaborate with other people. So yes, let me see about questions and comments in here. Yep. So yes, Ed, exactly. The port issue, there's nothing can be done about it. I have looked into it extensively because I invested a lot of time. Now, I wouldn't say that that time was wasted because it saved me thousands of hours. And I still do use those macros knowing full well that it's not 100% reliable. And I've even built other macros that go and find me all the files that don't have a proper connection, and then I just solve those. So it can still take what might be a 15 or 20-minute job and turn it into a 2 or 3-minute job, which is a measurable return on the time I invested in making those original macros. But yeah, unfortunately, you know, the real goal of having something that's super reliable, always going to work, something I had hoped would work but does not, would be something like this, where, and I'm telling you this, it doesn't work, but I'm telling you this so you don't have to go and explore it yourself. I had hoped that after importing a track, I could do something like right-click on this and say load track preset, and then click on this here and have that set the MIDI for me. So check this out. If I were to go create a new MIDI track, and I were to go ahead, let's see, these are all loading for some reason. Oh, I see what happened, yes. So MIDI track, let's say that I have the normal not connected, right? So I have this track that does not connected there. I would hope that if I went here and loaded track preset and chose violin, well, in this case, it does work. When I tested it earlier today, it did not work. So that's another option. That would be, you know, a little quicker because you could just right-click the track instead of having to do the select all events and move everything to another track. It's unfortunately something you can't do as a macro because it would still bring up that menu where you or the dialog window where you'd have to choose the preset. So you could make it into a macro or a button, and you know, it would save you a couple of mouse clicks, I guess, but you'd still have to select that track preset and load it. But that, I guess, is an option. I guess now it's working. You know, that doesn't give me a whole lot of confidence in it that it didn't work earlier when I tested it. It is working now, but you know, I'll take what I can get. If you can right-click and load a preset over an existing track, that's kind of nice because then you import the MIDI track from that staged project and you can just load the track preset, because the track preset can have more than just the routing. It could also have, if you use MIDI modifiers for maybe doing octaves above, doing octave spreads, or you know, any kind of harmonization, or even routing that audio using MIDI sends out to other instruments. You could configure all of that stuff into a track preset. So there's actually more value than just that port connection in using track presets. So maybe explore that. That's about all I have for it right now. Yeah, if you guys have questions about the Project Logical Editor presets that I've done in the past, let me know. I'm happy to talk more about that. Project Logical Editors is hugely valuable to me. I use it all the time. Something I didn't use probably for the first 8 years that I used Cubase because it intimidated me, but it saved me thousands and thousands of hours. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just reading through the comments here. Yeah, the macros probably, you know, would have led to a bit of disappointment as it did for me. Yeah, so I think we're all on the same page. We've all tried to find a solution to this. One thing that is great about what I've outlined here about importing the MIDI file into a staged project, having that as a container before bringing it into your master project allows you to work in a very reliable way. So this is how I've been doing things now for several weeks on a number of projects, ranging in styles, and actually came from a project that I was doing with Machine, which was like a hybrid sort of EDM orchestral thing. And I had to figure out how to integrate Machine with Dorico and Cubase, and it led me to this path. And then it really stuck with me. So it's reliable beyond just the Dorico workflow. It's really a great way to work with anything where you're getting MIDI content from somewhere, and you want to manage how that's integrated into a larger Cubase project. So that's where I'm going to wrap it up right now. I hope that that is helpful. And I am going to sign off. I will be back on Thursday, and I really appreciate you guys joining me today. I love seeing stuff in the comments. I love having discussions. And if you have questions, please post them, because that's what I love to do, is get questions, help, and hopefully even find topics to cover next time. And I will see you on Thursday if you can join me. Have a great rest of the week, and I'll see you later.